Hello, everybody. It's Mrs. Pound, and we have been studying Chapter 4 on cellular processes from BGU Biology's 4th edition. We've been taking a look at Section 4A on cellular energy, and so far we have talked about uh, energy and how the molecule that stores it and photosynthesis. Today we're going to take a look at Section 4.3 on cellular respiration. So our objectives today will be to differentiate between aerobic and anaerobic respiration and compare and contrast alcoholic and lactic acid fermentation. So cellular respiration, what is it? It is the breaking down of a food substance into usable cellular energy in the form of ATP. Now remember, we talked about ATP previously, and we said that it is a molecule that stores energy in between its phosphate bonds. And it's basically like a rechargeable battery. So when we want to release energy, we break that phosphate bond and form ADP, adenosine diphosphate. And when we want to add energy to the molecule, we add in a phosphate bond and it becomes ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So we talked about that whole cycle. Now, there are two types of cellular respiration. The first type is aerobic respiration. This requires oxygen. This is what our cells, for the most part, perform, and that's why we have to breathe in oxygen, is to supply our cells with oxygen for cellular respiration. The second type is anaerobic respiration. This does not require oxygen, and yeast perform this type of cellular respiration, and we use yeast to help bread rise. Now, all forms of respiration start with glycolysis. This is the breakdown of glucose to pyruvic acid during cellular respiration. It breaks the glucose molecule down into two pyruvic acid molecules and produces energizes, I should say, two ATP molecules. Now, I said there are different forms of cellular respiration. They all start with this process right here. And when I'm talking about cellular respiration, it really is quite an involved process. There are a lot of steps to it. When I studied respiration and glycolysis in college in biochemistry, it took us a half a year. It was a full semester class just basically on cellular respiration. So it's quite involved. So again, another one of those processes where I want you to appreciate how complex it is and yet how orderly it is, okay? To show that our Creator God did, in fact, put this process into place, that it could not happen by accident. So I think this is one of those things that shows that. And I am definitely not going to get that involved. This really is cellular respiration in a nutshell. So it all starts with glycolysis. So this begins all types of cellular respiration. It requires input of glucose and ATP. So we get out some ATP, but we got to put some in too. And it occurs in the cytoplasm. We learned during uh, our lessons about the different cell parts that respiration takes place in the mitochondria, but not all of it does. Some of it starts in the cytoplasm. Now, aerobic cellular respiration takes place in the mitochondria of eukaryotic cells. If it's a prokaryotic cell, everything will take place in the cytoplasm because the mitochondria are membrane-bound organelles. It has two phases, the Krebs cycle and the electron transport cycle. I'm not going to get into them in this video. If you're interested in this, you can take a look at your book and it goes into more detail about this. And it has a net output of 36 ATP molecules. That is a lot of charged ATP molecules. Okay, so net output of 36. And its equation is glucose, C6H12O6, plus oxygen, 6 molecules of oxygen yields 6 molecules of carbon dioxide plus 6 molecules of water plus 36 ATP molecules that are energized. if you notice, this is the opposite of photosynthesis. We just take out this 36 ATP and we have the opposite going on. So, uh, that is an interesting thing. So if you know the photosynthesis equation, you basically know the aerobic cellular respiration equation with just a few small differences. Now, anaerobic cellular respiration, we also call that fermentation, is the breakdown of glucose by enzyme action without the presence of oxygen. So no oxygen here. N in front of the aerobic and means not, no oxygen. There are two types. There's alcoholic fermentation and lactic acid fermentation, excuse me. And we will be doing both of these in class. We're going to ferment some grape juice using alcoholic fermentation, and we are going to make sauerkraut using lactic acid fermentation. So, fermentation a lot of times is used to make lots of foods. For example, the yogurt you see in the background, it's a very useful process. Alcoholic fermentation is used to help bread rise. There are also certain forms of bread. If you've ever heard of salt rising bread, that is lactic acid fermentation. Cheeses are due to fermentation. We use this for a lot of processes to make food. Now, it has a net output of only 2 ATP molecules, and this is the ATP that was made in glycolysis. It's a much simpler process than aerobic respiration, but you don't get as much energy out as well. It's much more inefficient. So it releases less energy per glucose molecule than aerobic cellular respiration. And many cells that normally carry on aerobic respiration can operate anaerobically when necessary. In fact, our own cells will do this. We can switch over to anaerobic respiration, but you end up getting cramps. And it's, like I said, it's not as efficient, it's not desirable for us. Um, and this is when you get muscle cramps, is when you switch over to this type of respiration when you're running and things like that. So our objectives today were to differentiate between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic, oxygen; anaerobic, no oxygen. Aerobic, much more energy in the ATP molecules. Anaerobic, not so much. And to compare and contrast alcoholic and lactic acid fermentation, which we will also be performing in class. So don't forget your 5 questions in your notes and continue watching this video to answer the questions at the end.